And thank you so much for joining us here for our 14th session, our 14th weekly session at School16. School16 is all about providing people with opportunities to learn directly from experts in the field. We think it's the best way to learn. It's how we teach at the university level, and it's how we focus on teaching our programs, is making sure that people can learn directly from people that are actually doing the work. In part because careers are very dynamic, and because these jobs, these functions, especially in tech, change all the time. They change sometimes even month to month, in part also because innovation is growing at such a fast rate. So we're really thankful to have Rose Spicer with us today. And Sergey, do you want to add anything else? And then we can just jump into it.
Yeah, just jump right in.
All right, and just so you know, Rose, Sergey and I did switch sides. I was on the other side when we started this call. But for those of you that are joining us,
for everybody's benefit, they had the same color shirt on when we first started. So
exactly, yeah. We did, and we did not plan that.
Vadim shamed me into going to change my shirt, and I did. So there you go.
Yeah,
you guys can tell.
There you go.
Thank you. Well, and also, actually, this is the first time we were able to cut our hair in like 5 months. And being identical twins, whenever we have the same haircuts, we look even more identical. So there you go. For those of you that are looking at us right now, you might not know who's Vadim, who's Sergey, but that's totally fine by us. People have been mixing us up our whole lives. It's not a problem.
If anytime somebody says Vadim, I turn my head to see. If
I actually do the same thing. So. Maybe because he likes my name better, but you know, that's okay. All right, Sergey, can you just make sure? All right, awesome, folks. So just so you know how this will go, we will be muting everybody except, of course, ourselves and Rose, so we can make sure that everybody hears our entire conversation. But we do encourage you to throw your thoughts into the chat. And you don't have to wait until the very end to put questions into the chat. We might not address them right away, but we do try to address as many questions as possible from that come in from you all. So as the conversation progresses, if something pops into your head and you want us to ask Rose that question or address that question, especially if we think it's relevant to the whole group, we will make sure to cover it. And of course, at the end, there will be a link to a survey. And if you fill out the survey, you will get access to this recording.
I want to add that, you know, given that virtual events like this have sort of replaced what we've come to know and love as far as in-person events where we get to meet each other and network, doing things like showing up, which you guys are doing, is the first step, but then engaging in the chat, like these little things, they actually matter because we notice the names that come through all the time. Who knows, people like Rose might notice, our speakers might notice the names that are here. So if you're here for the benefit of learning, that's awesome, and we're grateful that you are, but do make sure you chime in the chat because this is all a benefit to you. And maybe to start, while we introduce Rose here, if you can mention in the chat what brought you here today, why you decided to come, why you decided to learn from this particular session that's going to focus more on marketing today. We'd love to hear from you. So please do feel free to write that in the chat. And if a question comes up throughout this conversation, throughout the hour, please don't hesitate to come in and write. There's no such thing as a bad question. We try to ask as many as possible that we think apply to the group. So please do engage with us in the chat. We'd love to hear from all of you.
Okay, awesome. So Rose, thank you so much for joining us. As you guys can see in the title, and we'll actually stop sharing the slides right now so we can see Rose. Rose is the Global Senior Director of Marketing at Oracle Retail. And we'll start the session how we do with all the sessions, and just want to hear from you about your background. We just learned that you've been at Oracle for 14 years, which is incredible. I'm assuming you like it there since you've been there for so long. But yeah, if you could just tell us a little bit about your story, how you got into marketing, and how your role has progressed over the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. So I went to school at University of Richmond down in Virginia, and I had a marketing degree, so I focused on business. When I first graduated from college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I started out as an intern at a technology firm. I started by doing marketing research and doing quite a bit of data analysis. It was very exciting. And I also helped out on a lot of events and various different things, kind of odd jobs, whatever came my way. That internship then turned into a full-time position, and I was able to kind of progress within that technology firm. It was a company called Manugistics. And that company was acquired by a company called JDA, which is now Blue Yonder. So for anybody that follows tech, you would know some of those companies. But the thing that was really nice about the environment was it was a smaller company where it wasn't a huge marketing team, and we didn't have huge budgets or anything like that. So you really had to kind of dig in and figure out how to make things happen without a whole lot of money. So I would argue that that's where I became street smart when it comes to marketing, and not always relying on big budgets. I think that's important. As I progressed through my career, I started out in a marketing research function and helped to define the industry marketing approach that the whole company went after. So that was kind of cool. I then proceeded to focus into consumer goods and retail marketing, and then moved into a corporate role where I managed the website and did a variety of general things. I did have a lot of experience in events at that point. And then I left to go over to Oracle. And so at Oracle, one of the things that I'm passionate about was supporting investors. And one of the best words of wisdom the statistics, I was and I understand what they're connected to a couple different paths. We all know through marketing, there's a variety of different ways that you can contribute. I was focused on marketing research. I had been doing events. I liked the execution and the completion that came with events. Well, one of the things that the executive said to me, she said, they need the business. That is, you can create something like that, like events. But if you really create relationships with customers, got some.
Sorry about that. Had to mute somebody.
That's all right.
You were
no problem.
You were breaking up a little bit there, Rose. Can you start over what you were just saying in that last part?
So I got some advice from one of the executives that I worked with at Manugistics, and one of the things that she recommended is that you stay in business. So there's a lot of skills within the organization, but one of the things that she recommended is do something that differentiates you. So one of the things that would very interest me is working with customers. So I started out by recruiting customers to speak and things like that, but that kind of became my core, right, in terms of my passion and what I do and how I do it. So I think as I moved along and I went over to Oracle, I took a position that was focused on customer marketing and really taking that passion and all of the skills that I had developed and moving that into my primary role at Oracle. And so as I moved along with hard work and dedication, I was able to advance in terms of teams and building teams kind of smaller, and then it grew and grew and grew. I think part of that is the ability to collaborate with others across different lines of business. Within the marketing function, your primary customer is sales. There are a variety of different lines of business that you need to collaborate with, folks that are in strategy and product marketing, as well as consulting, as well as sales, and then also your executive team. And so one of the things that I think served me well was the ability to kind of work with various different groups. And I think coming from a place of understanding where they're coming from makes it easier to work with folks. So it's been part of the reason I've been at Oracle for so long. I've been here 14 years. It's never boring. So the one thing I love about tech marketing is I'm constantly learning about new technology. I'm constantly learning about marketing, and then I'm always learning about the industry that I serve. So I focus specifically on the retail industry. And so it's changing, it's dynamic. There's been a ton of changes actually that's happened in the last few months, especially with COVID. What used to be a very physical marketing interaction where we would rely on events and big interactions in front of communities has now turned digital. So there's a lot to learn, and it's constantly evolving. So just when you think you know everything, something else comes up, something new, some other way that you can get in front of folks. And it's harder, I would argue, because the physical is what we're used to. So now we're having to all move into either digital events like this or find different ways to truly connect with people. And it's way too easy to hit the delete button. So when you're marketing, you really have to make sure you land those messages with the end user. But all in, it's been a great run. I work with incredibly smart people. I have fantastic customers, and I'm never bored. I'm constantly learning. So it's been good so far.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And actually, I love the one thing that you said, which is your primary customer when you're a marketer in a B2B function is the sales team, and you're constantly working together with the sales team. And I think that's a really interesting perspective. I'm curious to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which is, it's actually pretty unique that you started off your internship was in marketing, which was kind of your first exposure, and you stayed in marketing all those years. If you kind of take yourself back to when you were first starting out in that initial internship, how do you think your perception of what marketing is? What do you think your perception was back then, and what do you think is kind of different in the reality for some of the young people, the benefit of some of the young people in the room that are considering marketing as a career path but never have done it on as a role? It sounds cool. It sounds fun. What would you say if you were to sum up what the difference is between perception of what marketing is and reality?
It's harder than it looks. I would say that it's kind of like a puzzle. I would say that when I first started out with marketing, it was definitely just it was very task oriented, right? But that's kind of normal when you're starting out in a career. I think the thing that is most helpful when you first start out a career is sometimes you're going to have tasks that feel like a job, not a hobby, right? It is a job. It may not spin your wheels and make you excited about it, but as long as you understand the strategic goal of something that feels more task oriented. So as an example, when I started out, I was living in Excel because they said, okay, go take our customer base and go figure out what the standard industry classification code is, and then go categorize all these guys. And then from there, they were taking those codes. I didn't know at the time why I was looking up all these codes. I just thought nobody else wanted to do this. So that's why they asked me to do it, right? Because I was young, I was new here. And what it turned out to be, which is kind of cool in the long run, is they took all of that data and they turned it into the way that they structured the entire go-to-market. The entire organization then became industry focused. So instead of just being general B2B, then they were able to take the data that I worked on for my executive team at the time and really direct the go-to-market. So I think that when I first started, I thought, there's a lot of tasks, there's a lot of to do, it's a lot of events, and you get really good at a particular task. So to me, it was very event oriented when I started, but it's so much more than that. And there are so many different touch points, and there are so many different ways that you can do interesting things with the content that you create as well.
So given the way that marketing has changed over the years, what do you think are for somebody that's considering it as a role, and let's take business to business marketing in particular, just because every role is different. What do you think are some of the core skills that someone should have, or kind of either have or attain for them to be competitive in that field, but for them also to feel like they are good at that job, right? So if you're considering marketing as a role and you're assessing this current skill set that you have, what's a good barometer for whether you should try it out?
So I think there's a bunch of different skill sets that can be successful in marketing. I think there's the ability to understand analytics and talk about outcomes and measuring the activity that you're doing. I also think that there's a huge opportunity for people that are good with relationships, to really foster the relationships and make the asks of customers to then be the stars of the program that you're putting together. I think writing is absolutely vital. You need to be able to write clear and concise copy that runs across different mediums. You also need to think creatively about how you take one piece and you actually can expand it across and deliver it differently for different audiences, because there are people that learn differently. So some people may like to watch videos, some people might like to have an engagement, face-to-face. There's some people that want to read it. There's some people that want to hear it as a podcast. There are some people that want to watch it and not interact. So I think what you need to do is you need to think creatively about how to make the mediums work for the audience. So the measurement, the creativity, as well as the actual writing. And the way that people can differentiate, there's plenty of work to do in the marketing field. There's a ton of marketing technology out there these days. There's products like Eloqua, there's products like Responsis, Oracle Marketing Cloud. There are a variety of different solutions out there that help you better measure. There's even solutions out there like Grammarly that help you write more effectively as well. I think there's a tech side of marketing as well that people don't really look at, where there's implementations of that technology. There's also understanding and becoming the expert to help marketers like myself that are actually trying to get out into the market to help them understand how to better use it. So there's a variety of different ways that you can have a role inside of marketing. And then because of that marketing technology, there's also the ability to truly understand it and then sell it to other marketers as well. So there's a couple different paths that you could take, but there's a tech side of it, there's a creative side of it, there's writing, there's measuring. So there's a variety of different roles inside of marketing that make it a much bigger world than it used to be.
So that's actually relevant to Mia's question that just came in. Customer marketing involves knowing about human behavior, but what's more important in your role? Understanding humans or understanding technology?
It's both. It's where it meets in the middle. So I think it's a good question. I think you understand what motivates an individual. You understand how the technology helps that individual and that company do their job more effectively. So it really is where the people and the technology meet. So whenever I interview a customer, I talk to them about people, process, technology. So when you do make a change and when you transform your business, you have to think about the different things that need to change and the levers that need to change in order to be successful. So when I talk to customers, I'm curious about their story. I think there's a human side of it. I'm definitely an extrovert, so that helps in my role. I like to talk to people. I like to understand their story. I like to understand their point of view. So it's that, but it also requires you to understand the technology, what it does for the business and the value it provides. So that way, as you're working with that customer, you can actually help to articulate the various different components of that. And that doesn't come quickly. That takes time to mature over your career. It takes a beat to understand the technology enough to have the confidence to engage with customers as well. But if you have a good coach and a good mentor that gives you a little space to grow and helps guide you along the way, I think that's the important part, is to find not only a manager, but a mentor that can help you understand and evolve in whatever role you choose.
So actually, I love that you just said that, and I want to ask you a question about the mentorship side of things.
Sure.
You're in a leadership role now. If you look at anybody that's on this call should go to Rose's LinkedIn. You can see her career progression. But you got opportunities to step into leadership roles as you worked in marketing, and I'm wondering, first of all, what role mentorship played in that. But I'm also curious how you acquired the mentors that you got. That's a big question for a lot of people. I don't have any mentors and I don't know how to get them. Do you have any advice on that part?
It's a great question. I think some of the toughest people that you'll meet in your career that are kind of hard to win over can be some of your best coaches. So somebody that seems a little difficult, that's hard to please, once you earn the right and their trust, they will probably want to be one of the best mentors that you can find. The other route that I would suggest taking is shadow somebody that you truly respect. Watch and help them to be successful, and in return, they'll give back to you. That worked really well for me early in my career. I also had some bosses that were tough. They had high expectations, and I think you've just got to rise up to the challenge And when you do, I think you get that respect in return. I think the other thing is you have to be open to feedback. So as somebody gives you constructive criticism, or they tell you it's not quite right, just go with an open mind and listen, because the more you take the feedback and you show you're listening to that individual that took the time to give you the feedback, then you're going to be more connected to that person, because they're going to understand that you're interested, that you are a high potential, that you're worth investing in.
No, you're so right. And yeah, absolutely. And it's actually, it can be somewhat subtle, but asking to shadow someone or asking someone for advice, and then not assuming that, they know what's going on with you, but actually coming back to them a few weeks later and telling them how you incorporated that advice is that first step in that mentor-mentee relationship, and it allows it to organically develop. So you have to get good at over communicating and making yourself noticed, making people notice that you're actually listening to the advice that they're giving. And that's how that starts. I love that you said that.
Absolutely. And everybody needs help, right? That's one thing that you need to remember, is that there's usually plenty of work to go around. And as you watch somebody that you respect in a role that you hope to achieve, offer to help them, right? Offer to take a load off and be somebody that can actually participate in the project. If they need extra hands, it may feel menial at first, but somebody that is working really hard on a project or has a lot to do, your willingness to just jump in and say, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, I'm happy to help. Even if it's something that feels like it's not something you want to do. Sometimes you got to do that in order to earn the respect, right? So I think a lot of times when I look at people that I've mentored and that I've worked with over the years, and I've taken people from personal assistant to director level here at Oracle. So if somebody works hard, they're loyal, they're smart, and they're willing to try, that goes a long way. I think that's important, is you got to have somebody that's willing to try, and that's constantly showing that you really need to consistently learn. So there's always plenty to do, and there's always new things coming out. Be the person that's the first to learn about it. Show that you're willing to do the research and that you're willing to do the work. So like search engine optimization as an example, it can be a conundrum, and this basically means that the words that you use in your marketing materials, in your collateral, on your website, etc., when somebody goes to do a Google search, when they put in those words, you want to rise up in that search. There's a lot more to it than that. That's a very basic thing. And you can really dive into the MarTech that goes with that. You can dive into the logic behind that. There's plenty of little niches inside of marketing, which always makes it dynamic and interesting. So just be willing to do the work, be willing to do the research, and help somebody out, because there are people that have been in there for quite some time, and there may be a perspective that you bring that's new to the table that they wouldn't have seen because they've been doing their job the same way for a while. But just come in with a humble approach is what I would say.
Speaking of that, Rose, Jenna had a question a few minutes ago, and she's a current marketing major, and she was wondering what side of marketing you prefer, and she mentioned SEO, analytics, research versus the creative digital side. I'm going to kind of rephrase that question a little bit and say, do you see value for people that are starting off in their career in marketing in specializing in a particular area like SEO, or diving really deep into analytics, or being more of a Jill of all trades kind of person that can kind of pick up anything and do everything pretty well?
It's a combination, right? I think if you're if you're too much of a generalist and you kind of have a little bit of everything, you're not going to stand out. So I think the one thing that I would encourage you to do is find what makes you happy. So one of the things that I say is if I have a happy employee, I'll have a productive employee, because you want something that makes you inspired to do your job, right? And so for me, it was always customers, but it was also that art of taking one long form piece of content and turning it into 10 different things. I love that, right? It's kind of a dorky thing on my side, but like I totally love that. And I think if you love numbers, you're good at it, then definitely focus in on that. If you find yourself really curious about things like Adobe and Adobe Illustrator, I wouldn't necessarily say go all in on graphic design unless you truly love it. But I think having a few skills that actually round out. So as an example, if you're focused in on something in particular like video, right? You're pretty good with Camtasia and you like that. There's definitely a space for that. If you look at all the research that's out there, video is definitely one of the biggest ways to communicate. So I would answer that question specifically to say, take your passion and try and match it to the role that you want to go for, because you never want to hate your job, right? You want to try and find something that can make you happy inside the mix of maybe some things that are just part of the job, right? And if you can find a little bit of alignment in that. So Jenna, if it makes you excited to go and look into the data and kind of solve the puzzle, solve the mystery of why something worked and what those results were, then that's one path. If you really have more passion about writing and then thinking about how do you take one piece and turn it into multiple things, there's a variety of different ways that you could go, but I would say that you need some sort of specialization that says, I'm a customer marketer, or I'm really good with marketing operations, or MarTech is kind of my thing. I love the technology piece of it. I'm not really into being in front of people, right? Introvert, extrovert, analytics, creative. I think there's so many different sides to the facets of marketing that helps.
So actually to touch on that, obviously because now you're in a role where I'm assuming there's a lot of people that report up to you eventually, and marketing as a function has really evolved significantly over the last decade. And I'm sure over the last 14 years, the job completely
changed. The last 3 months too. Yeah.
The last 3 months, exactly. Yeah. Like what you said is what you guys do now. It's different because the customers are in different places, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But if you were to maybe sum up how you think it really changed in the last 14 years, based versus when you came into Oracle, and maybe your role was more specialized when you came into Oracle, but at least like what the responsibilities were of your colleagues in marketing versus what they are now. Do you feel like it's just a lot more dynamic and marketers need to have a lot more skills to be effective?
I think there's a lot more opportunity to develop skills. I think it's changed in the fact that back in the day, and this is gonna put a little age on me. I'm 29 and holding, if anyone's curious. The biggest thing is print. So it used to be you pay for an ad and it was run in all these print magazines and you just assume that people saw it, and there was no way to measure how many people really saw it, what the click-through was, right? There was no such thing as click-through or engagement. So the measures themselves in marketing have changed quite a bit over the last 14 years because it's changed. It used to be you do a booth in every single show that feels relevant. You run print ads, you do this, you do that. The ability to get in front of people was not nearly what it is today. So before it was physical events, it was print advertising. It had nothing to do with digital. It didn't have to do with engagement. LinkedIn wasn't what it is today. And then you also have Twitter and Facebook and Insta and all of that, right? So I think more channels, more dynamic, and more real time. So there's no more excuse. You don't have 6 months to create a lead. You've got to measure by month as well. So it's shortened the time frame too.
And speaking to like the most recent change, for example, and I want to address Mia's most recent question, which is really relevant. What's the process for developing a marketing plan at a global corporate level? And I mean, I'm assuming maybe you did some of these activities recently because you had this massive change where you had to course correct. How does that planning process work in a massive company like this?
So essentially what you need to do is figure out where your salespeople are, where the coverage is, and what markets you're trying to operate in. So for us, we are a global company. We have over 50 cloud services that we're selling into retailers. So there's a key partnership that has to happen with the strategy team to say, where do you place your bets? What are your priorities? What are the messages? and work with, in my case, the general manager of the business unit. So I need to understand the strategic objectives. I also need to understand the splits and the expectations of the revenue in the various different markets, and then figure out how do I create a balance of engagement, of awareness, with press and thought leadership and a variety of different things. And then how do I actually create leads for sales to follow up on? And when I say leads for sales to follow up on, how do I give them something that they're actually going to follow up on? So you can have a number of leads, a volume of leads, but what you're really striving for is the outcome, which is a sale. So at the end of the day, you take a look at what you've done in previous plans and you look and say, what actually worked? And when I say what worked is, did sales engage with it? Did they actually take the baton and keep running down the track? So I think that's the important part, is to get the feedback from your customers, meaning your salespeople, also taking a look at the numbers and understanding the revenue and where people actually made decisions to go with your company for the solutions in particular. And if you can trace back what that engagement path was, how many times did you engage with that customer? Where did you engage with them? And what do you think were the pivotal moments in that sales cycle? And making sure that you really understand the mix that you put out before, and then you measure and move forward. So they say that if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. Does that help, Mia? Does that answer your question in terms of the approach?
Sure, thank you. That was really great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to shift focus a little bit here and talk about your experience as a leader in terms of how you think about hiring, because the folks that join our weekly sessions, some people are in school, but a lot of people are thinking about career transitions, maybe going from a completely different job and looking at marketing and saying, that's pretty exciting. I want to see if I have what it takes to get into marketing. Do you have any thoughts you can share about, given today's environment in a company like Oracle, in a leadership position, from your perspective, how you think about hiring, the kind of people that you get excited about bringing in, and how it relates to the decisions that you make, even when the candidate is not necessarily an obvious, on paper kind of fit. Like they didn't have 10 years of marketing experience where they're coming from a brand that's trusted and it's kind of an easy check box that you want to decide. Because that's I think a big challenge for folks right now, is figuring out how they can present themselves in a way that makes them hireable.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think obviously your resume, no matter what industry, it needs to show that you took the time to prepare and to think about how you could take your experience and parlay it into a tech firm. I think that's one thing, is trying to kind of work through how to transition those skills. And sometimes it's not an obvious thing, so sometimes you have to get creative on how you pitch that. But there are people that come from an industry, as an example, like hospitality as an example. We sell technology into hospitality companies, hotels, casinos, etc. Is there any way that you could take that experience and apply for a job in support, right? That you understand, you have empathy for the people that are on the other side of it because you came from that hospitality industry, and you could potentially parlay into a job inside of a technology firm that sells technology into that industry, as an example. So that's one opportunity, and that's not necessarily passing straight into marketing, but I think of the folks that have been most affected recently are food and beverage, retail, hospitality, right? A lot of people that were in the service industries. So how do you take that and actually turn that into your next career? And can you? So if you've got an aptitude for technology, if you've got industry experience and can parlay that in, that's a possibility. The other thing that is, I think, a good way into a big company like Oracle, there are positions called Oracle Digital where they are inside sales reps. And the positions are actually designed to bring people in that may not have a ton of experience, but it gives them a point of view and a perspective. It's an inside selling position, and it gives you a good point of view of what the sellers are actually going to do. So no matter what organization you end up landing in, it's a good way in the door. It's not easy to dial for dollars, right? It's not easy to pick up the phone and try and engage with people. There are a lot of digital ways that you can connect, but I think one of the things that's important is being willing to kind of try something different that's going to give you perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that was a great answer. And Sergey and I espouse similar advice all the time. We started off in sales ourselves. That's how we got into tech, because we weren't coders, and we figured that's the best way to do it. And that ended up opening up a lot of doors for us. So if you are willing to do that, it's not easy, but oftentimes the bar is a little bit lower.
From an experience standpoint.
From an experience standpoint, exactly. But I'm curious.
There's a ton of training, right, in that position, and it gets you in the door. So once you're in the door at a big company, if you do the work and you stay in that position for the term that they kind of set, then you can actually spread your wings and go somewhere else. And they encourage it, specifically at a big company like Oracle. So it's definitely something to think about. And I'm sure they do it at other big companies too, where if you're willing to take the time, learn the business, take that training, and then, put the time in, then it opens doors to other things if you're a good worker.
Actually, so can you touch on that a little bit? I guess maybe about a specific example where you've seen that at Oracle, where somebody started off in maybe a role like inside sales and then moved into something completely different. What's the process usually like? I mean, is it basically a relationship game, and then making sure you're meeting people cross-functionally, and then just applying to other roles internally, or how does that typically work at a company like Oracle?
Yeah, so basically, at a company like ours, people will come in, they'll get the training, they'll get the understanding of the sales process. Sales process is complex selling, so it's not so easy to put something in front of someone and say, I want you to buy this water bottle, right? There are value conversations, there's a variety of different things, there's different people that want different solutions. So for me, there's the pains of a merchandising line of business executive versus somebody that runs the store. So somebody that thinks about inventory versus somebody that thinks about the store experience. They have two different business pains. So as you go and you get up to speed on the training, you're going to learn about the business, you're going to learn about the complex selling process. And then once you have that baseline skills, it's natural to stay within that business unit, but you can also, you could also parlay that into other lines of business, where you could go into consulting, you could go into operations potentially if you have a financial oriented mind, you could go into marketing because now you've seen what assets actually work to engage customers. You also could go into support as well. So there's a variety of different functions, especially in the tech world, that are necessary to meet the end goal.
Makes sense. I want to ask Anisha's question. We touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can expand on it, which is, how do you set yourself apart from others at work and make yourself stand out in order to continue to move up and actually get leadership opportunities? You mentioned mentorship was one way to get those opportunities, but I'm curious what your thoughts on that are, and if you have maybe any examples of people that you yourself have promoted and why and how they stood out. I think that'd be really cool to hear.
I think there's a couple things. So there is a ton of content and training out in the world. I can teach skills all day. I cannot teach passion. So positive energy and passion and the willingness to really just be a problem solver, I think is a great way to stand out. To also be empathetic to your peers, to be a good team player, is a great way to be able to stand out. That's my personal opinion. And so in terms of people that I've worked with over the years and people that I've trained and mentored, I think the key is just giving people exposure to different parts of the process. And you don't do that unless you have trust with that team member. You believe that they're willing to learn and that they've got the smarts, and that you also have kind of a candid and open relationship. So that feedback that I talked about earlier is super important. So in order to really stand out, I think become a person that the leader can depend on. And with that becomes an opportunity to work on more interesting projects, to raise your hand, to work on those projects. The key for me is drama free. Don't create drama, be a team player, be positive. I'm not saying don't stand up for yourself, because I think that's absolutely critical. But if you are taking a positive attitude, if you're consistently learning, if you're raising your hand to help others when they maybe don't have bandwidth, and just really having that team approach, I think is huge. You will stand out. So there's no fear of blending in when you are positive and you are supporting others. That definitely gets noticed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I'm curious. I think a lot of people, they think about rising up the ranks and moving up and getting more, a bigger title, bigger, more responsibilities. It's equivalent to getting a bigger paycheck, and that's why a lot of people pursue it. But it's not necessarily, management is not necessarily the right move for everyone. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on if somebody's considering marketing as a function. Like, are there certain types of jobs in your experience in marketing that tend to, maybe at Oracle that tend to pay well even as an individual contributor, where your income potential goes up, where you don't necessarily have to be a manager and be good at management to have that income go up and to make sure you're getting more responsibilities?
I think instead of the money part of it, what I would focus on is skill acquisition, right? One of the things that I think is important in any career move is that you're running towards something, not away from something. You're going to have jobs that are not great, right? That's just the reality. You're going to have managers that are difficult. You're going to have peers that potentially drive you nuts. But the important part is that you've got to always have a thoughtful reason to move forward, and it can't always be about the money. It can't always be about the title. It's got to be about interesting projects and about interesting skill acquisition, and really trying to move forward, and the rest will come.
So then maybe what were some of the ways that you found effective ways to quickly, or maybe not quickly, acquire skills that would make you a much more effective contributor at work and maybe make you stand out as well?
Yeah, because not every company has, robust built out training programs, maybe like Oracle does, especially if you look at some of the smaller companies. So I think that's a great question, actually. The skills acquisition side, a lot of people don't know where to start.
Or maybe how are you yourself deliberate about that? Yeah.
So there's a lot of free stuff that's out there too, right? I think there's different digging that you can do around to actually go and search up topics. There are conferences, especially for marketers, that are actually not that expensive. There's some great, there's a great B2B marketing conference that I go to as often as I can. It's run by, what is it? Gen 3, I think is what it's called, but it's a B2B marketing exchange. It was in February and April, or in February, right before the shutdown and the COVID stuff. And there were so many sessions that were so wonderful and so relevant that that you couldn't figure out which one to go to. So there were a lot of people that were presenting case studies and a variety of different things. A lot of that content can easily be found on the internet. So I think it's just a matter of getting out there and looking at it. There's also a lot of free stuff on the Content Marketing Institute. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but they've got a lot of articles, a lot of best practices. There's also a lot of people that blog because they're just trying to give back and give advice to other people. So I think it doesn't have to be a formal LinkedIn training program where you get certifications and things like that. It doesn't have to be a it doesn't have to be a formal learning path, if you will. Because most of what I find is a combination of inside out. And I think it's also important for us to be looking from the outside in to make sure that we keep that perspective. So.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely helpful. And I'm also curious, because I'm just looking at your experience and what you are responsible for now. It looks like a lot. It looks like you're essentially doing everything.
Feels like a lot.
So can you kind of walk us through your day? Because obviously now you're also managing people, but clearly you're still responsible for individual tasks. What does your day typically look like nowadays, at the very least?
Everyone's different. Every single day is different, which is actually what I love about it. So I've got a team of direct reports, and I do like 30-minute one-to-ones every other week with those guys to try and stay connected with what they're working on. We do a lot of working calls where I'm giving feedback on particular projects. There are a lot of cross line of business collaboration calls, and then coming out of that, we need to go and need to go and kind of get the feedback on the strategy and what are the messages that we need to be doing. And then we also need time to go and write. So it's usually a combination of a lot of calls, a lot of Zoom sessions, a fair amount of collaboration and work with my team. We use Slack all the time, so we're constantly connected. I have a wonderful team of people that are super talented and really enjoyable to work with. And so it's a lot of collaboration. It's probably a good combination of strategic thinking when I'm trying to figure out what's going on for that quarter, how we want to spend the budget, what are the things we need to do to achieve those goals, what's the content we want to showcase when we actually decide to invest in an advertising program, what's it going to look like. So it's a combination of stopping to think about what I've heard over the last few days and really sitting down to figure out what we're going to do. So every day is different. I think it's a lot of listening, talking, and then trying to carve out the windows to write. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is finding more daylight, right? To be able to get all these parts and pieces together. But I do love it. And I love it when I get to add customer calls into the mix on that. I really enjoy just talking to people. So it's usually a hybrid of individual project work, a fair number of calls, and then analytics to figure out where we're at with things too. So I touch everything at this point, and I enjoy it. But I also have a lot of great people on my team that know what they're doing, and they don't require a lot of micromanagement. So that's the beautiful thing too, is that I actually have the ability to then go and work on some great projects myself, which is rewarding.
Interesting. So I'm curious then, can you talk about maybe what some of those projects are, or a recent project that you worked on? Because you said that it's rewarding, and clearly it's part of your job that you do enjoy, is getting still to go deep on some of that stuff yourself.
Yeah. So if you go and looked at my LinkedIn profile, you can see there's a lot of articles that I've written. The thing that I like the most is probably getting in, and we do a lot of ghostwriting, I'm not going to lie, right? We interview our executives, and we find a way to kind of put pen to paper to be able to take all of the smart things that they've said and put it into a thought leadership piece. So since mid-April, we've written 18 articles that are all about actually trying to help retailers figure out what they're going to do coming out of the COVID crisis. So if you just look back on retail, and the thing that's neat about retail is you and I can experience it as consumers. The thing that we're trying to do is say, how can our technology help these retailers that the brands that we personally love, that we work with, how can we help them kind of figure out what's next, and how do they effectively reopen their stores? How do they deal with the inventory? It's a combination of things where you have this great community of customers, and the individuals in the community, and you want to help, right? So by taking the ideas that come from our strategy team and taking the solutions, and also listening to the customers and our customer advisory boards and our user groups, and actually pulling that into a completed thought leadership piece, it's just really cool to see it come to life and then see it hit the internet and you're like, okay. And then people click it, they like it, they engage with it, and you think, okay, we hit the mark. That was totally worth it. So it may have been a couple late nights, but like, I think the sense of completion and then the reaction from the market is what is probably one of the things I'm loving right now. I think that's one of the things. Yeah.
That's great. There was a question earlier in the chat dialogue that I actually wanted to address before we wrap up, which is someone asked about how to find good internships, and I want to rephrase it a little bit and ask, how do you assess whether an internship or a position is going to be good? Because there's so many companies that make themselves sound great on paper or on the job ads, and then you come in there and you're either, quite frankly, doing BS work, or the management is really awful and no one cares about you and your career trajectory. So do you have any tips on how to assess that, perhaps during the application and or interview process, to know that you're getting into the right role?
I think the person that's interviewing you matters a lot, right? I would do a read of that individual because they're going to be critical to whether or not you can learn in the role. So I would pay attention. I try to read that individual to see if they're really ticking a box and they just want someone to do the grunt work, or you feel like they're ready to teach and ready to give you skills that are going to actually build your resume. I think the people side of it is something that I would think about. I think as an intern, you are going to have some stuff that is a little bit grunt work, but like I said about those SIC codes, I still remember them. And I had no idea at the time, and it felt like it was the BS work that you just mentioned, but it turned out to be strategic. I had no idea at the time. I was thinking nobody else wants to do this, but it actually turned out to be pretty strategic. And had I known that, I think I would have felt better about the work. And I just trusted the process at the time because I was young and trying to learn the business and everything like that. And I just thought, this is a project that needs to get done. I'll do it. So there's just some of that that's going to come with an internship, but I think it's okay to ask what's the vision, what's the strategic purpose of the project. So I think ask the questions about what type of work, what would the day look like, and also what the takeaways would be. So if you're a hard interviewee during an internship and you're not just saying, hey, I just need an internship to round out my resume, I think you're going to get more out of it because it's going to be push-pull.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And once you land that internship, and by the way, this is for any role, I believe, you can be proactive for asking for more responsibilities. Rose mentioned earlier that one of the things that mentors like to see, or people in other positions and more senior positions like to see, is somebody that just comes to them and offers their help, right? So if you're willing to do that extra work, if you're willing to actually ask somebody without being worried about bothering them and helping them solve their problems, helping them with their day-to-day, that's going to go a long way. But also remember that, and you said this earlier in the conversation too, remember that for anyone in any role, doesn't matter how senior you are, there's going to be parts of your job that aren't amazing, right? That maybe you don't even necessarily look forward to, but you have to do to be effective in that role. So you do have to be ultimately okay you have to suck it up at some point and do the work if it's going to help the company overall.
I think one thing I would say on that is chances are the executive you're doing it for also had to do grunt work like that early in their career. So I think it's kind of a means to the end, right? So you can't come in expecting to be the highest paid on the team and only getting the glamorous jobs. You've got to be willing to take a combination of things that are asked of you. It doesn't mean that just because you're the last man in, it doesn't mean that you have to take all of the grunt work, but I think you have to be willing to be open to a combination of roles and responsibilities in order to learn the job, right? Because the executive that you're supporting or the more senior team members, everybody has to start somewhere. Yep. And I think as long as you're open-minded and you're willing to learn, just don't expect to come in and have everybody, kowtow, right? So when you're the new guy, you kind of earn the respect of your teammates. You earn the collaboration, by just being open-minded, being team-oriented, being positive, being helpful, and being available. I think one of the things that I would say, and the danger right now, is everybody's gone remote. So it's probably harder to find those internships, because usually what happens with an internship is you get project work that's a pass by in a hallway that says, hey, let me show you this project, let me do this. So I think in this new world where everyone's gone virtual, the key is to always be available during the work hours. I'm not saying that if you take an internship that you should be answering calls at midnight or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But I think if you do sign up for an internship, be very clear that if the work hours, the expected work hours are 9 to 5, then you are available and accessible. And if you're going to step away from your desk, you just make sure that you over communicate on that, because I think there's some hesitation when people are coming in from a new point of view, that you just want to make sure that people understand the work from home situation, because I think it's going to be different, right? And you're going to have to communicate more. So you're going to have to be comfortable. And I think it's pretty common now, but you got to be comfortable with that always on type of thing. And then when you're doing project work, just make sure that you talk to somebody, because it's really distracting, right? When you're trying to write something, you're trying to do some analytics, to have that ping of Slack or WhatsApp or whatever technology. Just make sure that you communicate with your manager to say, I'm here, I'm working on this, but I'm going to go dark because I need to write and I can't actually do it when I've got these dingings going on in my ear. So I think the key to that when you do land the internship is that transparency between you and your manager.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful point to wrap up this conversation with, which is getting good at communicating, and even over communicating, especially as we're moving a lot to remote work, is going to be a critical component of your success, especially if you're just starting out. I see Caitlin asked the question about how to find a mentor. Caitlin, we didn't ignore you. We talked about this a little earlier. We are going to have a recording of this call available. Vadim's about to share a survey. So for anybody that fills out the survey, we really appreciate your feedback in advance, and you're going to get the recording. But getting good early on in your career, getting practice, asking for things, asking for projects, asking questions, over communicating with your managers and potential mentors. That's how you get noticed. That's how you get additional responsibility. That's how you get people bought into your career trajectory. And if it's something that you're not comfortable, if you're not comfortable asking for things or advocating on your behalf, you just have to start doing it more, and you're going to get comfortable with it, I promise. Rose Spicer, thank you so much for your time, for spending the hour here with us today and sharing your story and sharing about the trajectory of your career and some tips about marketing and the reality of marketing today. Again, Vadim just dropped that survey link in there. We're going to email it to folks as well, but we really would love to hear everybody's feedback. Thank you also for everyone for joining us here today. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you, Rose. All right, all. Thanks a lot. Have a good rest of your evenings. Rose, have a good rest of your afternoon. I know you're in SF, so you still have work to do. We're just wrapping up here, but thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye, all. All righty.